Greetings, students, and welcome back to the Arcanian Assemblage. I am Jetta Berkmont, scholar, archivist, and stoneholder. I thank you all for coming to this second lesson. Considering how vague things were in our first meeting, I feared that there would be many among you who decided to simply move on. That said, I can assure each and every one of you that the subject of today's lesson shall go into much greater detail. For how can we not, when the subject matter is visible in the sky every time we lift our eyes? It is the source of all of our world's magic. It plays a prominent role in many religions. It is a constant friend, providing us with light by which we can find our way during the night. But it is also an enigma, seemingly endless, one that no amount of dedicated research has as yet scratched the surface of. Even so, there is much to discuss and plenty to know, and that is what I am here to share with all of you. So get comfortable, students, and listen carefully, for today we delve into the mysteries of the Pale Ring. To the casual, uneducated eye, the Pale Ring might appear to be a monolithic circle that wraps around our world in one solid piece, like a giant wedding band. However, the truth is that the Pale Ring is not a single solid band, but is instead comprised of countless millions of pieces, forever flying in circles around our world. Each shard of the ring varies dramatically in size and shape. The smallest that we've gotten our hands on have been measured to be no more than a few inches across, while the largest could potentially be as large as castles or even mountains. Each of these shards emits a constant glow, a soothing, silvery light. In the night sky, this light is bright enough that we can see the world around us, albeit in muted shades and with deepening shadows, still bright enough to navigate. And this is, of course, assuming that there are no clouds present to block it out and bathe the world in actual blackness. The nature of what this light is will be the subject of a different discussion when we start going into the finer points of magic, but for now, all you need to know is that this light is known as Luma, short for the luminescence. The Pale Ring has been present in our sky for all of recorded history. But in spite of all of that history, we actually have no idea how it is the ring came to be. As I said in our previous lecture, it was already there in the sky when our ancestors emerged from the world below. That said, there are numerous theories about the Pale Ring, as many as there are cultures that developed to speculate on it. But none of these theories have as yet been confirmed to be true or false. I'll give you a brief summary of those we have here in Emira and abroad in neighboring Pavara, Auravir, and in southern Lassun. Let us begin first with religious teachings here in Emira and Pavara. It should come as no surprise that across Aurus's history, there have been numerous groups and sects that believed the ring was a gift or a trial of sorts, and that by mastering the gift of magic granted by the ring, mankind would achieve enlightenment and be allowed to transcend their mortal lives. Alas, the disaster in Thalgrim's gift around 100 years ago saw such groups swiftly curbed by the Pentist Church. This is not a surprising outcome, considering the damage to the city that the disaster wrought. We'll go more into details about that another time, however. Speaking of the Pentist Church, the dominant religion here in Emira, the prevailing teaching is that the ring is a creation of Ainin, the Hammermaster, and was made at the behest of Suna, the Green Hand, and Anuna, the Lord and Lady. It is said by the Pentists that the Pale Ring and the shards it delivers to Aurus are pieces of divinity drip-fed to the people of Aurus as an aid, but also as a test of our intentions. For if the Pentists' preachings are to be believed, only the pure of heart and soul may wield the magic of the ring without succumbing to the temptations of power. For this reason, given the nature of my organization, you can imagine that the assemblage has butted heads with the Pentis Church on no small handful of occasions. But we're not here to discuss politics, so let us move on. Turning our attention to the south and arriving in the place of my birth, Auruvir, the story is very different. The people of Auruvir, sequestered away deep in the depths of the Jethican jungle, have long held the stance that the Pale Ring is something akin to the branch of a cosmic tree, and our world is but one of its many fruits. The mother bird of Auruvir, a harpy eagle made of solid starlight, is said to preside over Aurus from this branch, observing us and diving in to render aid should we be led astray by greed and avarice. The luma emitted by the ring that reaches Auruvir through the jungle canopy is thought to be the pollen of the tree's flowering roots, and the ring stones that fall to the surface are considered to be either tree sap or seeds, depending on the group you ask. And these stones have proven invaluable in enabling the jungle nation to thrive, despite the inhospitable nature of their chosen land. As you can well imagine, this has bred tremendous love and respect for the ring and the stones it provides in Auruviran traditions. As a little inside secret from a native, some particularly zealous sorts would even make the decision to grind down a ringstone and snort it like some sort of narcotic. The end results were always... but I'm getting off track. Let's just say it was a bizarre thing to behold and move on, shall we? Now, moving even further to the south, we will come to the nation of Lassun. There, the meaning behind the Pale Ring and the origins they tell of are very different from the general ambiguity of pentism or the love and respect in Auruvir. In the Lassun faith, it is said that the world is overseen by a trinity of wardens. In the aftermath of the fall of the Aurians, this trinity came to the determination that magic is a force of irredeemable evil, and so to punish the sins of mankind stripped us of the innate gift of magic. But they could not simply eradicate this power. There was nowhere for it to go in the Trinity's heavens, and they could ill afford to allow mankind to reclaim such a corrupting gift upon their passing. And so they sealed the magic away in the heavens, in the sky, and used its new form to clasp the world in a shackle of blinding silver. It would bar the gates to paradise until mankind had repented for their sins, and that shackle is the Pale Ring. Given this origin story, the people of Lassun believe that any contact with the Pale Ring, its shards, or the luma they emit is considered a horrific stain upon one's soul. It is a corruption of the heart and the mind, and so those who practice magic there are practically non-existent, and when they are found, they are brutally and efficiently persecuted, often being put to death or locked away in inhumane isolation chambers in the deepest dungeons, all in the name of keeping the corruption from spreading. As a magi myself, it is deeply troubling to me to see the magic treated with such disdain there, but I would be lying if I said I blamed them. Lassun was, up until relatively recently, historically speaking, under a vastly different form of leadership that in many ways was repeating the mistakes of the Aurians. A magocracy where one's talent with magic was valued above all else, prompting them to hoard ringstones and attune to the ring with reckless abandon, and those without such abilities or resources or talents were seen as dirt or less than. And with that as their role model, and with the desperation for freedom spurring them on, is it any wonder that they came to revile the gifts that enabled their former masters to dominate them so? And in the end, the corruption of power was, in their eyes at least, proven true. There was a civil war among the mages of that old nation, and they tore themselves apart and their nation, leaving their civilian population to pick through debris and detritus and rebuild in the aftermath. It was a long and arduous process, and many died. And one can only imagine that, if they are real, then the Trinity of Lassoon were scowling with bitter contempt from their seats on high the entire time. There are countless other origin stories, of course. The Rythar have as many origin stories for the ring and its significance in their cultures as there are tribes of lion folk, and outside of religious circles, there are just as many secular beliefs. For example, some claim that the ring did not exist until after the downfall of the Aurians. Another theory states that it has always been there, but it somehow changed form after the collapse of the Aryan Empire. The theory that I personally believe in is that the ring has always been there, forming at the same time as the rest of Aurus. Our ancestors, crammed into the world below for generations, would have had no way of knowing about it or making use of it, and without any education on its presence from their slavers, well, what information could they have at their disposal to recognize its existence? And on the subject of their slavers, those of you thinking back to our last lecture must be wondering, what did the Aurians think of the Pale Ring? Considering the frequency with which they used magic and the undeniable significance it held in their society, surely they held the ring in the highest regard, and under any other circumstance that would be a sound conclusion to come to. But it is one that, sadly, is difficult to support, much like most of the mysteries of the Aryans. In the admittedly few remnants of their writings that have been discovered and successfully translated over the centuries, there have been no references to the Pale Ring. Instead, there have been a small number of references to something they called the Sovereign Lights. Now, granted, it is widely assumed that they simply referred to the ring by a different name. It was a different time, under a different culture, and with a different language. Having a different term for it is only to be expected. But there is one small matter that complicates that. The Aryans refer to the Sovereign Lights, but there is only one Pale Ring. So unless they were referring to the individual shards of the ring, then their allusion to Sovereign Lights implies that they believed there was more than just one source of magic, or at the very least, they held reverence for some other source of light, more than just the Pale Ring. As an interesting point of order, there is a great deal of iconography and symbolism in Aryan architecture depicting circles and spheres that, presumably, emit light. Those of you who attended our first lecture may have noticed the recurring theme of circles running down the robes of that Aryan illustration, or emblazoned upon the front of their grand spires. I can think of only one such light in our sky: the sun. As such, perhaps they believed that magic is also in some way tied to the sun. And that theory is not entirely without merit, considering a strange phenomenon that happens in the hour when the sun passes behind the Pale Ring, which is what we shall discuss next. Now, I should hope that I do not need to tell you all about short night, the long period of every day when the sun passes behind the Pale Ring. The duration of this period varies based on time of year and where one is in the world, but on average it's about an hour long. It can be a truly enchanting time of day as the world grows dim and the world is filled with shades of orange, red, pink, and purple, like a little tease of the coming sunset. Now, to most of you, short night will be nothing more or less than a stimulating visual phenomenon, or perhaps an indication of the time of day. Depending on where one is in the world, short night could happen early in the morning, late in the evening, or as it is here in Emira, near noon. But as all of our magic originates from the pale ring, you may not be surprised to learn that when the sun's light shines through it, it interacts with the luma the ring emits. When this happens, spells begin to behave in unusual ways. I will avoid going into too much detail for the time being, as magic is the subject for another lecture, but I'll give you the gist. It is a difficult thing to accurately describe, as the various effects Short Night has on magic vary wildly from spellcaster to spellcaster and from situation to situation. There's no consistency to it, but in short, the most common effects are spells misfiring, not doing as they were instructed in the incantation, being weaker than intended, or in opposition, being far too powerful. But this is only true of spells that originate from the ring. Spells cast by a stoneholder, or the magic imbued into an enchanted item, generally only suffer very minor disruptions. As an example, Short Night will have very little effect on any spells I cast, as I am a stoneholder. Look here. This is my ringstone, and no, none of you may hold it. It is a shard of the pale ring that has fallen to Aurus and now rests in the palm of my hand. Countless such pieces fall down to our world every year, filling the sky with routine sparks of fire. Very few of them ever make it far, however, being vaporized in flame long before they can touch down. I am attuned to this stone, and any spells I cast are therefore drawn from the luma it emits, but not from the pale ring itself. As a result, my spells won't get disrupted anywhere near as dramatically as they would for someone like, say, an attuner. Attuners draw their magic from the ring itself, and so when Short Night occurs, their magic begins to act very erratically. That disaster at Thalgrim's gift that I mentioned earlier was the result of a powerful spell being cast by an attuner during Short Night. If you've any questions about what I mean when I say attuner, I'll be discussing them in far deeper detail in the future, when we discuss Luma and magic itself. For now, there is still more about the ring that we need to cover. Now, given the effect Short Night has on the ring, we can safely assume that the sun has at least some form of relationship with it. Whether or not this is an incidental relationship, deliberate, or something else entirely, is one mystery we're likely to never find the answers for. If there is any form of magic emitted by the light of the sun, no one in all of recorded history has been able to uncover a means of even so much as detecting it, much less harnessing it. Now, with all of that said, there's actually not much left for me to cover in regards to the ring. Not without having to launch into very long lectures that would take me the better part of several hours to go over, and I'm providing these to give everyone a basic understanding of things. But there is one other point I wish to address, even if only briefly. I mentioned before that ringstones fall to Aurus routinely, yes? Well, it is not uncommon for these fallen stones to end up in the possession of dragonkin. Dragons, or more accurately, the kobolds who religiously serve them. It seems that those rare mythical creatures have a great deal of respect and love for these stones. Even the legendary Thalgrim, the blue dragon after whom our nation's capital city was named, is rumored to have kept a bounty of ringstones where he made his lair, before the first settlers arrived at his doorstep. Why the dragons covet these stones, however, is anyone's guess, and few are the dragons who are predisposed to even speak to the races of man, much less answer our countless questions about them and their kind. But that is a matter we can discuss in more detail another time. For now, it is time to bring this lesson to a close. I thank you all once again for attending these impromptu lectures of mine. Now, when next we come together to discuss things, I will be going into more detail on Luma, magic, and the various types of magi. As before, if you've any questions about today's lecture, please, by all means, ask, and I will try to get back to you when I can. But for now, I must return to my duties. Once again, thank you for coming. And until we meet again, I bid you stay safe and keep the spark of curiosity ever alive in your hearts. Farewell.